Okay guys, you saw the final result at the beginning of the video, but basically we're trying to make a Star Wars inspired visual effects shot inside Blender, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, if you want to work along with us, I have all the things I use in the description for you to download. So if you want to go work along with us, make sure to go download those. First of all, I'm just going to come up here, go to Visual Effects, Motion Tracking, then just going to open up our clip. Okay, so here is our clip right here, the movie. Let's just open that up. And then first thing we need to do is come and go to Color Management, make that to Standard, and then just set the scene frames and prefetch for footage. Now I'm going to quickly run through how I camera track my footage. However, if you want a more in-depth tutorial, I'll link that in the description below. But first, I'm going to set my match to previous frame, normalize, and then make our correlation 0.9. So all that is looking good. Now we just need to detect some features to let Blender automatically decide those. Then for the threshold, I like to set mine to a 0.01, and then my distance to an 80. Just so we have a little bit more tracking markers in our scene. Now we can go ahead and hold Control and press T, and it'll start tracking our footage. Okay, so now we can actually bring this menu up here, and you can see all of our tracking data and everything. You'll see that there are some that kind of go a little bit crazy, such as this one. You can just tell that by seeing any line that goes crazily above or below the others, kind of like an outlier. So we could just select all those and delete those, kind of like what I'm doing here. These are just lines that kind of go a little haywire and aren't going to be that useful for us for tracking. Like this one right here. The green looked pretty good. It's just the red on my thing that look pretty wonky. And so that is looking good, just to clean that up a bit. So now we can actually go ahead and do our first solve. So we're going to come over to the solve tab. Then for this, I'm going to set my A and B keyframe to be 50 to 150, just because if we come down here, that's actually the part where I have the most parallax and everything. So that looks good. Then we're going to refine all of these, the focal length, optical center, and this radial distortion. So all of those, and then solve the camera motion. Okay, so we got our first solve error. It's a 3.44, so that's okay. We can go ahead and clean that up a little bit though by coming over here, clean tracks. We're just going to move that up until we select a few up here, and then we can just delete those and then solve the camera motion again. Okay, you can see that it's already got our solve error down to a 0.66, so that's really good. Let's just clean it up. I'm going to try to get it below a 0.3, so I'm going to show you one other time, and then I'm just going to do it until I get it. So again, just going to select a few of these. Just delete those and then solve the camera motion. Okay guys, I cleaned up the tracks 4 or 5 more times, and I was able to get our solve error down to a 0.25, so that's really good. We can also see down here that we now have this blue line, and it should be all straight throughout. That is a good sign. If you see that somewhere in your clip it goes kind of haywire and goes up or down or whatever, you actually want to add some more markers over there. But since we have a nice solid blue line, we're actually ready to start importing some stuff in and setting up our tracking scene. So first of all, we need to come down here. Let's hit the set up tracking scene button. You should see that we now have this up here. However, it's not orientated on the ground or anything, so we actually need to solve for that. So let's go back in there. And now I just want to select 3 points on the ground that try to make a 90-degree angle. Okay, so for me, I'm going to select this point, and this point. Then we're just going to hit set the floor there. So that is looking pretty good. It should match up to your actual floor plane, how it is up here. However, we do need to orientate it. So let's come and set this to be our origin, just because that's the closest it's going to be. And then we also need to set our y-axis. So let's just set that real quick. So that's looking good. And I want to make it scale down a little bit. So let's just select 2 of these points right here. Set scale. And I'm just going to play around with this distance till I get something that I like. Okay, so now we are actually done with camera tracking. We can come out to the layout tab just to view and see that our camera is tracked correctly. What I like to do is select this little cube, hit G, then Z, and then hold Control and click that up 1, just so it's on the floor plane now. And now we can actually hide this by hitting H, and let's see if it tracked correctly. Okay, so as you can see right now, our cube is staying on the ground and everything, so it is tracked correctly and everything. It looks pretty good. It's not really moving around too much. Even though if it was moving around, we wouldn't really care, since our little ship is going to be in the air most of the time. But that's just a nice little thing to make sure when you camera track. So now we can actually go ahead and start setting up our scene. So first of all, I like to delete this background collection. Then also the background beat layer, since we don't really need those. And then since I deleted those, we also need to delete these 4 nodes right here, just all those. You can delete and plug the movie clip into our alpha over, and then hit convert to pre-multiply. So now our compositing is all set up. Next thing we need to do is come to the layout tab. We can hit Alt H to unhide our little thing. We don't need this cube either, or this light, which is automatically in the scene. You can just delete that as well. Okay, so now we're actually ready to add in the ship into our scene. So I actually found a free download online of the Razor Crest from the Mandalorian TV series, and it's already textured and everything, so it's a really good model to use. Here it is, link is in the description below to the person who created it and everything, so thank you a lot for creating this. This is a really nice 3D model. So the only one we're going to be working with is this .fbx file, so you just want to make sure you download that. So once you have that downloaded, we can go ahead and import it inside of Blender. Now there are many objects to this actual Razor Crest and everything. So what I am going to do, I'm going to make a new collection. I'm just going to name mine ship, like that. And then you just want to make sure that you have this selected. Then we can come up to File, Import, then FBX. Then you just want to locate wherever your FBX file is. Mine is right here, so we can see FBX is here. Then we just want to import that in, and it should take a little bit since it is such a big file, but once it's in, I will let you know. Okay, so here it is inside of Blender. You can see that it is a little too large and everything, and since we made that collection and had it selected, all the parts of the ship are actually in this nice little folder over here, so that's just an easy way to keep it organized. So let's make sure to select all of this stuff. I'm actually going to go ahead and parent it all together, so I just have to select only one object. So with all these selected over here, I'm just going to hold shift and then click this middle one, just so it's highlighted yellow now. And then what I can do is hit Control P, that'll set the parent to, and we want to set parent to object, like that. So now, if I just select this middle one, it'll move all the other ones around. And that's just an easy way to make it a little more easier to select and everything. So now we're actually ready to scale it down and add it into our scene. So let's come over here. We do need to scale it down a bit. I'm going to say around there is good. And then we do want to make sure it's on our floor plane because that is how it's going to look like it's going to be stuck to the ground instead of floating in midair. So if we just hit G, Z, I'm just going to move it right on that little red line, since that is where our ground plane is going to be. And then we need to actually move it to where we want it to be. Okay, so with this selected, first of all, I'm going to rotate it. So RZ, and then just going to rotate it right there. I think that looks pretty good. And then we can hit G, Shift Z to move it on every axis but the Z axis. And just move it somewhere right there, I think. So that's where I'm going to keep it and everything. You can, of course, move it around and stuff. I'm actually going to scale it up just a tad bit more and just make sure it's on the ground plane again. So that is looking pretty good. Now let's go inside a rendered view to see what this looks like. Okay, you can see that it doesn't look that great, and that's because we A, don't have any lighting in our scene, and B, we are actually still on the Eevee render engine. So first of all, let's change our render engine. So come over to the render properties. I'm going to go to cycles, set it to GPU compute. Then render, I'm going to set my sample count to be 64 for now. We can always mess around with that later. Adaptive sampling on. For denoising, I'm going to put the viewport denoising on. And then for light pass, I'm going to set all of these down to 3. We can, of course, change those later if we have to. And then for the caustics, I don't like any of those on. Next, we need to make sure that film transparency is on, just so we can actually have a transparent background and everything. And then performance, I'm going to set to 512 by 512. Like that. And since we are going to be rendering this out as a PNG sequence, we actually need the correct color management. Basically, color management, it would be standard if it's rendering out a video clip or anything like that. However, if we want it to be super realistic looking, then we want the view transform to be from standard to filmic. Filmic is basically what you're wanting to use if you're rendering anything out in the viewport and anything, so we can combine the two later, but for now we're going to leave it on filmic. Okay, so now we have most of everything set up in our render properties and everything, but if we still go back into render view, you'll see that it still looks kind of crappy and everything. So now we actually need to mess around with the lighting of our scene, so let's come to the shading tab. I'm just going to go, instead of object, I'm going to select world, and then just going to open up a environment texture. Connect that to the background and open that up. Now the HDRI is down in the description if you want to go download that, but I am using this abandoned tank farm HDRI. I'm just going to open that up real quick, and then we can go into render view to see how that looks. Okay, so now you can see that that looks a lot better and everything. However, we don't have any shadow on our ground, and that's actually because we don't have this ground plane being the whole thing. So let's just go to the camera view by hitting 0. then just scale this out a bit. I'm just going to scale out something crazy just so we have a lot of room to work with. Okay, so now we have our shading in our scene and everything. However, the shadows don't really line up. If you can kind of see this car and everything, it's basically coming from the top, and this really isn't what we want. So I'm going to go ahead, click this, hold Control T to import the texture coordinate and mapping node, and then we just need to rotate this. So what I'm going to do is come to the material preview, come over here to make this scene world checked. So now we can actually see our HDRI in our scene in material preview. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically point where I want the sun to be. So I know the sun has to be somewhere up here. So what I can do is hit this rotation. We're just going to move it like that until it's like right there. And we also need our sun to be up higher a little bit. So I'm just going to rotate that until the sun is a little bit higher in our scene. Now let's go into the camera view and rendered and just see what that looks like. Okay, so that is a lot better and everything. I'm actually going to move the Racer Crest just a little bit further out, just because I don't want the shadow to kind of look weird on these rocks and everything. So that is looking pretty good. One thing I will notice about this HDRI is that the shadows aren't matching our actual scene and everything. So what I did earlier that I found worked out pretty well and everything was to go ahead and actually add in another light in our scene. So let's go ahead and do that. Shift A to add. We're going to go add a light, and this one is going to be sun. But you can see that that's basically just added this little object in here. However, the sun doesn't really match the same shadow as this one. So what we can actually do is, first of all, I'm just going to increase the strength. I found that 15 before was alright. Actually, I needed to do 10. Let's see if that looks good. So now, yeah, basically we just need to align those shadows a little bit so that it won't look off when we actually render this out. The shadows should align, so you just want to kind of rotate that until they align like that. You can also hit double tap R to get those aligned a little bit easier. You just have to fiddle around with it, but this is one of the better ways I found to actually correct the shadow. Okay guys, so I got my shadow correctly aligned and everything, and you can see that it matches a little bit more to this car and everything now. So that is looking good. You can of course play around with the strength value and everything. So I'm just gonna make that right there. I think is looking pretty good, and everything matches our lighting of our scene. If you want to help match the lighting a little bit easier, you can actually come here to the camera, go here, background images, and then just change this opacity up, and that should help out a lot when you try to match the lighting. Okay, so now all we have left to do is to actually animate our thing, and also this glass really isn't textured for some reason. That's a super easy thing we can do. So let's do that first. We can come up to the shading tab, go instead of world, we're going to go back to object. Then we can just kind of zoom in here to see what we're doing a little bit. So this needs to be a black glass, so I'm just going to add in first a noise texture, because we need some kind of roughness over here to make it look more realistic. So first of all, let's make this kind of a black color. I'm gonna make it a little dark blue just because I like that effect. And then what we need to do is make our specular go up a little bit. So that's looking pretty good. However, it looks kind of fake and everything. We need to add some roughness to it. So let's plug this factor into the roughness value. And then we can just hit shift control click to view what that looks like. You can see this is what this noise texture is doing. We basically just need to up that scale a bit. So something around there is looking pretty cool. So now you can see that it looks a little bit more dirty and worn and everything. So that is looking pretty good. We can play around with the specular a little bit. Something around there, I guess. Okay, so this is looking pretty cool and everything. However, it's just stationary right now. So what we need to do is come back to layout and actually start to animate this thing. Okay, so to animate, I like going into solid view. So just hold Z and go to solid view like that. So it's nice that we have this thing in the middle that can control the whole object. So we can only do, we only have to do keyframes for this middle object, and everything should follow. So what I'm going to do is select this. And I'm basically just going to animate this how I think it should look, and then we can play around with it a little bit. I'll kind of walk you through what I'm doing, but really this is just trial and error. So first of all, what you can do is come here. Let's actually hide this ground plane since we don't really need that. So right here, I'm just going to hit I and set a location keyframe. And then I know somewhere along the line I want the ship to actually raise up. So I'm going to hit G, Z, So it's going to be up here about. So hit I, and then you can kind of just play that and see if that's correct speed that you want and everything. So that's a pretty good speed and everything. So yeah, that looks pretty cool. So now we actually need to do rotation. I think I want the rotation to start right around here. So I'm going to hit I for rotation. So let's just say a rotation keyframe there. And then we're going to come over here. I'm going to hit RZ and just rotate it how I think it should be rotated. So kind of like that. So that is looking good. Now we can just hit I again and hit rotation. So now let's view what we have so far. We can see it raising off the ground, then it starts rotating and everything. Rotation is pretty fast, so we might move that a little bit. Let's actually go ahead and do that. So I can select this little keyframe down here since this is my rotation keyframe. I'm just going to move that a little bit further along just so it's continuously rotating and everything. So like that. That is looking pretty good and everything. I'm just going to keep this simple, and I could do a lot of advanced like animation and everything, like the things contracting and everything, but I'm just going to keep it simple for this. I do want it to be rotated up a little bit, so what I'm going to do is going to hit period on my numpad, so we lock it to this object, and then I can come to the back here and double tap R, and then if I move my cursor down, it'll actually move the ship up a little bit. So that is looking cool. Let's just hit another rotation keyframe, and that was on the same keyframe, so that overwrit the rotation on the other one. So let's view this. Okay, so we can see that the ship slowly goes up and everything, and then rotates into view. Now here I do want to actually have the ship kind of dart, so I'm going to come to frame here, 228 for me, but just a few frames after your last location keyframe. If you're getting confused on where all your keyframes are and everything, what helps me is actually bringing out another window and then going into the graph editor. You can actually see all the keyframes laid out for you. And then if you push this menu down, you can actually hide the rotation keyframes if you don't want to worry about those. So now we can see these black dots represent the location keyframes, and then if I was to disable those and re-enable the rotation, you can see that these are our rotation keyframes. So just an easy way to organize those. But anyway, let's push this over here. I basically want the ship to basically blast off into space and everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and come to the back again just by hitting period and then pushing my way to the back. Now I'm just going to hit G, Shift Z to move on every axis but the Z axis. We're just going to push that over there, kind of off in the distance like that, and then GZ, move that up kind of like that. See location, let's see if it kind of goes in a straight line. So you can see that the thing is still rotating at here, so we actually need to move it over here. So let's move that here, location. Okay, so that's a little bit better and everything. It won't matter too much since it's going to be so fast. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so this is the basic animation I did. Again, nothing too complicated or anything. It just raises off the ground, then slowly rotates up, and then at the very last minute it'll go away and everything. I actually want it to be a little bit faster, so what I can do is select this keyframe I just made and move that a little bit closer. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. Just play around with it until you get something that you like, but this is what I'm going to stick with. Okay, so let's just right click and close this area since we don't need that anymore. Let's just come out and kind of view some of these frames on render view, just to kind of get a feeling of what these are going to look like. Okay, so yeah, that is looking pretty good and everything. You can just come out throughout this footage and kind of see and test. Next, let's actually start setting up some render settings and actually composite this out and everything. So first, we basically just want to render out the ship and nothing else. So to do that, let's come to the compositing tab. Now this is our ship icon. If I go ahead and render this out, you should see that we actually have our final result here and everything. However, the color is off and everything. We can't really render this out as is because the color of the ship is right. However, the color of the background is all weird and everything. So we're going to get around this by actually rendering out just the ship with a transparent background. So let's kind of view what that looks like. Here is the node that we have from our view layers. We can see that we have basically what we want right here. So what we can do is we're just going to hit this movie clip and this alpha over. We're just going to hit M to mute those. And then you want to make sure that this render layers node is plugged up to the composite. That just means that only this is going to be composited instead of the movie clip in the alpha over node instead. So now what we can do is actually render out a PNG image sequence. So to do that, let's come to the output properties. We're going to come down here. We're going to set a new file location. Now I do recommend making this its own folder, so I'm just going to go ahead and add a new folder and call this image sequence final, like that. So just just go into that folder and hit accept. You don't really need to worry about naming it. And then it's already set up to be a PNG image sequence, so you do want to make sure it says RGBA. The A is very important. Then the compression down to 0%. And then finally, all you have to do is just go ahead and hit this render animation button. Okay guys, so my thing just finished rendering, and you can see all these PNG sequences that we have here. So now we actually need to combine those into Blender. Now I use After Effects for my compositing. However, I'll show you how to do it in Blender after. So let's go ahead and hop into After Effects. Okay guys, here we are inside of After Effects. Let's just import all the stuff we need. So first of all, we need our movie clip, so just drop that into there. Next, we actually need our PNG sequence. Now to do that, we need to go ahead and hit import file. Then we just need to locate this, so here is mine. You can just click the first one and make sure that PNG sequence is selected here and then import that in. Now you do need to interpret it, just because right now the frame rate is set to be 30 FPS. I don't know why that is the default one instead of 24, but to do that, all you do is right click, hit interpret, then main, and then we can just set this to be 24 FPS like our video is shot in. And so just drag this, make a new composition with that, and then drag this to be on top. And so that is most of the work done already. You can see that it is looking pretty good and everything. You can see that the ship is basically on top of our tree and everything, so we need to composite the tree to be on top of our actual guy. So an easy way to do that is we're just going to copy this, paste it, put this layer above here. This is basically going to be our tree mask. Then we need a way to actually mask out the tree, and it's nice because we have a nice blue sky, so we can actually use that kind of as a chroma key. So we can go ahead and add an effect, come down to keying, just going to add this key light, and then we're just going to pick an area kind of around the tree that's blue, so like that. Then we actually need to go here. I like to show the screen matte, just get that kind of in there, and then we can come down to screen matte and kind of just mess with our clip white and black. I'm just going to move my clip black up a bit. Let's try this. Let's try this. I think this is what I was using before. We'll just set that back to final result and everything. So now if we kind of scrub through here, yeah, there you go. Now you can see that our leaves are basically up above our little ship and everything, so that's pretty cool. However, if we come down here, now we have everything being messed up over here. So basically, what's nice about this clip is that we only need it right here. So what we can do is come to a frame before, so right here, and then we can basically just drag this all the way over until it's right there. So now we actually have everything looking pretty good. And finally, one thing that I like to do is to add some noise into my render, just because it'll match the footage a little bit easier. So I'm just going to select my PNG sequence and just going to go up to Effect. Going to go to Noise and Grain. Then you're going to add some noise real quick. And then the amount, I usually keep it between 2 and 3, but just whatever works for you, whatever your camera is like. And then I'm going to uncheck Use Color Noise, and that just adds a little bit of noise into our render. You can barely see it, but it is there. It's going to make your render look a lot more realistic and everything. Okay, so we are now done with After Effects. You can go ahead and export that out and everything. But like I said earlier, we can also do it inside Blender, so let's go figure that out. Okay guys, so we are back inside of Blender. Now this method is very complicated compared to the After Effects method, so if you do have After Effects, I recommend just sticking with that. But there is a way we can do it inside Blender. So first of all, we need to get rid of these render layers node and replace that with the image sequence that we just did. So place a image node in, then we can just hit open and navigate to wherever your image sequence is, and you can just hit A to select all of these and then just open that image. And you can see that that's already imported in all of our frames as an image sequence and everything, so that's looking pretty good. Now we can combine that with the movie clip node to get our previous result, so let's just hit M to unhide both of those, then replace the image with this image socket. And now if we shift control click, we should see that we now have this like we did before. This is our previous result and everything. Now you can actually come up to the render properties and actually change your view transform to be standard instead of filmic. So this is what it was before, and now with standard, this is what it looks like now. Just basically improves the colors and makes it more accurate. Okay, so to actually combine this in, we need to do the same thing as in After Effects, is isolate this tree and basically put that tree on top of that. So what we can do is come over here. We need to separate this tree out again. Basically do a chroma key. Now the keying inside of Blender is actually very complicated and I don't really like it. So what I'm going to do is instead I'm going to separate the RGBA value of our movie clip. So now if we shift control click down to blue, we should see that we now have a nice separation of the sky and everything. So that is really nice. We do need to actually correct some of this though. So let's go ahead and add in a color ramp right here. So that'll basically let us crush those values a little bit. So we just need to crush the white towards the black and everything. So that should make the sky more prominent and everything. So that is looking pretty good. Now we can actually see what that looks like in the factor of our alpha over right here. So that is looking really good and everything, kind of like the effect we got in After Effects. Now again, we only need it on a certain amount of frames. Now we could do some more compositing or whatever, but what I actually like to do is I actually like to render it out as two separate sequences. So I'm going to render basically from frame 1 to frame 217 without the mask and everything. So we're just going to take the mask off since we're not going to really need it until after 217. So right now I have it how I am going to composite it. We just need to set the alpha over to be in the composite. Then we can come to here. All of this should be the same. However, we do want a new folder for it. So I'm just going to name this final image sequence. Like that. Plug that in, hit accept. RGBA, all that stuff is the same. And then we're just going to render this out. Okay guys, so we can see that my things are rendering right now. But basically you can see that this little frame counter is going up. And basically we just need it to get after 217. So right there, now we can just come out of here. We're just going to stop this render process since we're going to change the render settings after this. Okay, so I stopped my thing at frame 221. That's fine. We're gonna be replacing these anyway. So let's just come out of here. Now the first frame that we need to render after this is 218. So I'm just gonna set my start keyframe here to 218. So now this is where we actually need that mask. So we're gonna put this color ramp image into the factor of our alpha over. So now it should render out that mask of the tree and everything. So now we need to render the next few frames and everything. So let's just continue rendering the animation. Okay guys, so I just finished rendering this animation. So to actually combine it into our final movie clip, we're going to come up here to video editing, and then we're just going to come make sure this frame is 1 again, because we set it to the other frame earlier. Come to the first frame, we're going to add in a image sequence. Go to the final image sequence folder. We're just going to select all these, paste those in there, and now we have everything. We should see when we come out to the frame that it changes. We shouldn't notice anything. It should just look pretty good and everything. It does look kind of finicky and stuff, and that's because Blender isn't the best compositing software. That's why I highly recommend you guys to get After Effects, or also DaVinci Resolve has a free kind of thing like that. So that is the effect right there. So now we can just come out here, go up to the output properties. We're going to change this to be a new location. Then we're just going to change the file format to ffmpeg, encoding to MP4. Then set this to be high quality, and now finally we can render out the animation one final time. Okay guys, so up on the screen right now is the final result we got from this tutorial series. Now this is the After Effects one that I did. I did a lot more effects and everything, such as the noise I showed you guys earlier. I just think it looks a little bit better and everything. Now this was just kind of a cool little effect to do, and thanks for the creator of this model. Link is down in the description to go download that. But anyways guys, thank you guys so much for watching. We have a Patreon and Discord. Links to those are in the description below. But anyways guys, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.